There was a mom who came to my parenting classes and was frustrated because she was constantly at a loss about how to handle various behaviors in her toddler. She would get the answer to how to handle one thing, and then the next thing would come up and she would again feel clueless about what to do about that. This would cause her to respond in ways that created bad behavioral habits in her child until she could find the answer for each specific thing. The problem is that she had the mindset of a student who just wants to get through a test. For a student with that mindset, it isn't about learning the subject, but it's more about knowing the specific answers to get a good grade on the test. In other words, she wasn't considering the concepts and the reasons certain methods worked to curb her child's behavior. She just did the methods for each specific behavior, and those worked individually. For example, when her child wouldn't come when they were called, she learned the method to teach them to do that, and it worked. Great. I'll put a link to that video in the description below and up here on top if I can, in case that's an issue you're having with your toddler. But what happened when the child refused to stand up and walk and would drop to the floor instead of walking along with her? She didn't know what to do then, because she hadn't understood the concept of training her child to obey and how to apply that to all other similar situations. There are 3 basic ways a parent will respond to a child's behavior. Which one you choose will determine their behavior in the future and the habits that accompany it, no matter what the specific behavior is. Here's a phrase to memorize in order to be the most effective parent you can be. Every response you give to your child's behavior becomes an expectation and then a habit. This means that when your child displays a new behavior, that is the point at which their expectations will be created. Those expectations are created by your response to that behavior. If those expectations continue to be met each time they repeat the behavior, a habit is formed. So think in your mind from the perspective of your child. When they display a specific behavior, what are they experiencing from your response? Here are the 3 responses and what they tell a child. Number 1, a lack of response. A complete lack of response from you tells them 2 things. 1, the action is acceptable, and 2, you don't care about it. It doesn't matter to you if they behave this way. Number 2, a positive response. A positive response also tells them 2 things. It tells them that the action is either acceptable or even desired, and that you care about it. It matters to you when they behave this way. Number 3, a negative response. A negative response tells them 2 things. The action is unacceptable, and it matters to you when they behave this way. So let's look at those 3 responses in regards to a behavior that is debated among parenting experts everywhere. A tantrum, for example. If you do not respond at all to a tantrum, this tells them 2 things. Your lack of response tells them that the tantrum is acceptable and that it doesn't matter to you if they behave that way. Is this the message you want to send them about throwing a fit? That it's acceptable and that it doesn't matter? No, of course not. I think you probably don't want them to think this is an acceptable behavior. But to ignore it is the advice many people give about tantrums. They say it will cause a child to stop because they don't get attention. True. They will stop eventually. They aren't going to tantrum forever. But by not responding, you're not teaching them how to behave. And that is part of the job of a parent. The second response would be a positive response. Now, this might seem silly to you that I say there would be a positive response to a tantrum, but actually many progressive parenting experts suggest just that. They say to get down on their level, to tell them you understand they're frustrated and empathize with their feelings. Remember, you're supposed to think about the parental response from the perspective of the child. So what does that positive response tell to the child? It says that you think this behavior is acceptable, and they will receive positive and empathetic action from their parent when they display a tantrum. Is this the message you want to send them about throwing a fit? That it's okay to throw a fit if they're frustrated or angry? No. A good parent wants to teach them how to handle their emotions in an acceptable way, and a tantrum is not an acceptable way. The third response is a negative response. This doesn't mean yelling at them or putting them down. That would be an unacceptable parental response. An effective negative response should be one that teaches them that this behavior is not acceptable and a parental response that they would not want repeated. And one that teaches them to control themselves without escalating the situation. Remember, your response to their behavior creates an expectation and then a habit. What habit do you want them to form about how they respond to anger and frustration? To throw a fit? Or to control themselves and deal with the situation whether they like it or not? Or, if they're old enough, to talk to you about it at an appropriate time? What habit do you want them to have? It will be determined by your parental response. So if you watch my other videos, you know that I have a method called the CTM method that helps with tantrum behaviors, and I'll put a link here so you can click on the screen and get to that instructional video. If this video has been helpful, before you go, please remember to subscribe and hit that like button. That helps me out and I'd really appreciate it. Parents, you can do this. I hope to see you here next week.